this morning, I was thinking about something that I was listening to last week, last weekend, and it was a message that was showing the importance of the different vessels. You know, that and vessels were a very important thing. You know, and because that's where you put your possessions. You know, in the time. You know, Middle East. I mean, you had sand and everything that would get into your stuff, so you had certain vessels that you would place things in, and it got me thinking about vessels and what it means to be a vessel, and that's why this morning I wanted to talk about being a vessel for God. And you know, and I listened to another message that someone was giving. You know, they were talking about bringing your vessels and having them empty and ready to receive, which is a very good teaching. It's a very good mindset to have, is to have that ready to receive vessel, that emptied out vessel. But he was talking about getting it filled with more miracles and works and things like that. You know, and it kind of just struck me a little bit odd, because that's not what we want to fill our vessels with. And I think the attention was kind of off on what that message was trying to say. So, you know, the question that I have this morning is, what does it mean to be a vessel for God? And you know, to answer that, it's a willingness to let go of control over your own life and let God do His work through you. But in order for you to do His work, He provides what you need. He fills your vessel with what you need to do the work that He has set before you. So, you know, we think that we have control over our lives. You know, we drive a car. You know, we have complete control. It's very scary when we lose control. You know, there was multiple cars I heard last night that were either blown off the road or hydroplaned. You know, it's a very scary idea to lose control when we're driving that car. But why do we fear the idea of having no control over our lives? Because I mean, we can't control every aspect that we encounter. We can't control our environment. We can't control the things, the circumstances that come against us. We see ourselves lacking the skills or courage to do something when we're asked by God to do a certain thing, or to approach a certain person, to speak His word to someone that is in need. Sometimes we worry about either what they'll think, or that we will be tongue-tied and not get it out in the right order or the right way. In that regard, I would say that in the things of God, we're always going to be lacking if we're doing it in our own strength, and that was the point that I'm getting to. However, God calls us to do His work that we know that we can't do in our own strength, and that's the important thing of being a vessel. So, in this work that He is wanting us to do, He's having us to do, putting us. I thought I had a different slide. Sorry. I'll get to that in a minute. He's looking for a surrendered heart. He's looking for an empty vessel, not a confident heart. Not someone who thinks that they can do it in their own strength, and not someone who's got their vessel half full of their own strength in the first place. Looking for an empty vessel, you know, and that mindset of having a confident heart in ourselves speaks of the belief that we can do it in our own strength. So, in 1 Samuel 17, and David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Now, in this account of David taking taking this lion and slaying it, he could have kind of gotten full of himself, Yeah, I can handle this, bring it on, let's let the next one, let the next one come and try to mess with my flock. He could have gotten that, but he saw what was happening here. He saw, he gave this credit to God, giving him this strength to deliver it out of the lion's mouth, to deliver the lamb out of the lion's mouth. So he was not overconfident here. And going on in verse 36, thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And I'm sure Saul at that point was just like, okay, go ahead, do what you're going to do here. But, the whole reason that he had this confidence, because the Lord had showed him before, I will deliver these things that come against me, not come against you, but come against the armies of the living God. And those things that come against God, those things that speak against God, I'm going to deliver these things unto you. So God will be our strength when we are commissioned to do this work. These things that he wants us to do, he's going to be our strength in these times that we need that strength, that supernatural strength. So, what about the courage part? Because, he had to have courage to go up against this giant. How we muster this courage to step out and do these things he's asking us to do. Can we do that? And that's another thing that's another thing that kind of reminded me of Moses when he was, Exodus 3. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. We go on to see I'll go ahead and go to chapter 4. And the Lord said unto him, who hath made man's mouth? So Moses, started kind of questioning what God could do through him, because he's I forget how it puts it exactly, a man of, I can't remember what the term is where he said the speech, about his speech. Slow of speech, yeah, I can't remember exactly how it words it. I was reading it in the Amplified earlier, and I can't remember. Yeah. So anyway, he questioned at first, the ability of God to use him in this work, in this, going to the Pharaoh and confronting him, and he starts making excuses. I'm slow of speech. I don't do good with confrontations. It's kind of the thing here. Who's going to give me this? And then, of course, the Lord turns and said, who hath made man's mouth, or who maketh the dumb or deaf or seeing or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth and teach thee what thou shalt say. And he said, O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send. So God is going to give us these tools, give us this courage, give us this strength to do this work, to do what he asks us to do. These things, and this is not some big thing like rescuing a nation out of a empirical rule. This is our everyday thing that we should be looking for strength and encouraged to do these things because, we can see where the world is going and how many people are falling away. What about a perseverance? So perseverance and always kind of reminds me of Abraham and Isaac here in Genesis 22. Verse 6, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. He said, Here am I, my son. The father, he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went, both of them together, and they came to a place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. So, this speaks of a perseverance, a pushing to do what is actually commissioned, what God has commissioned you to do. So God will be our perseverance when He commissions us to do His work. He will give us that strength, that focus. We have a part in that too. We have to stay focused on Him, but He will give us that perseverance to do those things that He is asking us to do. So, how do we reconcile with something that just seems out of place? Have you ever been challenged to do something for God that just doesn't, in your mind, add up? And we see this all the time. Well, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It must be God. So, in the next example, and going through these examples, these are just reminders of things that I've seen that shows where God gives us the strength, gives us the courage, gives us the perseverance, and it's not always logical because in our minds we can't see all the details. So in verse 1 of chapter 9 of Acts, and Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest and desired of him letters to Damascus to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And he journeyed, and he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined around about him a light from heaven. And he fell to the earth and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And he trembling and astonished said, Lord, what wilt thou have me to do? And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go unto the city, and it shall be told thee what thou must do. And the men which journeyed with him stood speechless, hearing a voice, but seeing no man. And Saul rose from the earth, and when his eyes were open, he saw no man, but they led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. And he was 3 days without sight, and neither did eat nor drink. And there was a certain disciple at Damascus named Ananias, and to him said the Lord in a vision, Ananias. And he said, Behold, I am here, Lord. And the Lord said unto him, Arise and go into the street which is called Straight, and inquire in the house of Judas for one called Saul of Tarsus. For behold, he prayeth, and hath seen in a vision a man named Ananias coming in and putting his hand on him, that he might receive his sight. And then Ananias answered, Lord, I have heard of many of this man, how much evil he hath done to thy saints at Jerusalem, and here he hath authority from the chief priest to bind all that call on thy name. But the Lord said unto him, Go thy way, for he is a chosen vessel unto me, to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the children of Israel, for I will show him how great things he must suffer for my name's sake. So it took two different people here in this situation on either end of the spectrum to be willing to be that vessel. First, of course, he had to strike Saul blind, to get his attention, to just blind him. But he said, "Here I am," and then Ananias, even though that he knew Saul and everything that he had done to the early Christians, he went ahead and emptied himself of his fears, of all these things that he had heard about Saul, and followed God's commandment. So it takes a fully surrendered heart, and that's what God is looking for. Our flesh has a habit of getting in the way and groaning and complaining, being fearful, and even it shows through all this that even there was fear, but there was a willingness, there was an emptiness, an emptying of the vessel, so that God could have his way and have his will. But even though there was complaining and fear and all these things that got in the way, there was always a willing heart, and always a willingness to do what God has asked him to do. And in the last example I'm going to give here in Matthew 26, and he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And I put in the phrase here that has an amplified, that is consistent with your will. So, we always have to be aware of God wanting to use us, and this is one of the things that I got from the man that was sermon that I was listening to. But he kind of went more towards the direction of miracles and filling your vessel with blessings, which there are, and don't get me wrong, there are those things, but coming with an empty vessel, not coming with a vessel that's already a quarter full of something, because anything that's put in there is going to be polluted, going to be diluted, and you're not going to be able to hold all this preparation, all these things that God's going to give you to do these things, because it's going to be partly your strength that you're going to be doing these things in. So, and that kind of gets me to today and what we see today. We all are vessels, but and we're all the same type of vessel. We're all molded clay, so we're a molded clay vessel. And it makes me think about the Steve Green song, Broken and Spilled Out. It's an amazing picture when you think about it, bringing that empty vessel, because if we bring something that's filled halfway with what the world is, what the culture is, we can see this with many of the church today. They'll bring in things that they were influenced by the culture, and it taints what the Lord's trying to do. And in the end, it's just all a big chaos. It's all a big mess, because of all these things that have been brought in. Instead of bringing in empty vessels, we bring in culture from the outside and mix that with what God's trying to do, and in the end, it's not going to work. And Hollywood has gotten a lot more blatant. We were talking about that this morning with all the things that are going on. And yesterday, it just it kind of grieved me. It doesn't surprise me, with everything that goes on, but and I don't keep up with a lot of these new artists or music or songs or musicians, and apparently there's a rapper who has teamed up with Nike, and he makes these shoes with Nike that are completely satanic themed. So they've got pentagrams on them, and the soles of the shoes have depicted like human bodies on the bottoms of them, and they contain 1 drop of human blood in each pair. You know, apparently this guy is pretty popular with younger kids, because I mean he was on the Grammys or whatever, and I just don't understand. I don't understand the cult of death, that surrounds these people and this culture, but I can see how people can get lost in it. But we saw that even at the conference that we went to. There was just joking about things that shouldn't be joked about, and it was almost calling in that cult from the outside, and you can use that and see that as a partially fooled vessel from the culture coming in and tainting what would have been, a good informative conference, and even the worship service, there was a little bit of that there too. But it just kind of goes to show how we always have to come into God's presence with an empty vessel, because we're at risk of tainting any kind of blessings, any kind of strength, any kind of supernatural provisions, that we can that He's going to give us. We'll just dilute it. That's pretty much all I had for today. It wasn't a whole lot, but it's the idea of being an empty vessel for God and what He has for us is just, it's been on my heart, and that kind of goes off of the royal appointment that I was speaking about earlier this month. We're called to a place in His kingdom, and if we're not ready for that position, and if we're not ready for those things that He's going to have us to do, I mean, we're going to get picked off. This is a battle. It's a war. So we have to keep our mind on that, keep our focus on that. This is a war. This is not playtime. I think a lot of Christians, well, I'll go to church, and then the rest of the week, and that's, unfortunately, that's becoming kind of more the mainstream. I heard there was an officer in one of the military branches talking, and he said now you can't be a professing Christian. They're basically hunting down people that carry a Bible with them. So it's getting more and more heated, this battle, this spiritual battle, and those who are not aware of it, they just roll along with it. They just say, well, the times are changing, and we have to change with them. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Christians that are being pushed over, right now, because they just don't see the importance of standing that spiritual ground and planting your feet on that rock, and not being blown with the winds of change, the winds of culture.